Rebecca. That's not your
Rebecca.
name. That's not your name. You're Don.
I'm Don. You're
Don
not Rebecca
Shanahan.
either. You're Ian.
Well, thank you for recognizing
Oh,
that.
oh hey, yeah.
Although we are talking about two Rebeccas today,
Mm,
so it's possible, hey, why not? We'll just both be Rebecca.
yeah, I'm good with that. Uh, I'll be the one from the black and white movie you never see. You have much more darker, gorgeous hair. You be the Rebecca from the new movie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Although the fact that we see Rebecca in the new movie, that's strike one. Now, you have a
I hear you.
review up at Every Movie Has a Lesson, which I
I
have not
do.
read because I just watched both movies today. It was a very long
Ooh.
afternoon with
Uh-huh.
the Rebeccas. So I don't know what your read
Hmm.
on the remake. We're talking about this because Netflix has a new version of Rebecca out, directed by Ben Wheatley, taking like reimagining Alfred Hitchcock's
Yeah.
1940 film. So just high level before we get to the synopsis,
Hmm.
because I just want to kind of know what kind of conversation I'm dealing with here, because I got
Uh-oh.
feelings.
He has
What did you make
feelings.
of the remake of Rebecca?
I was okay with it.
Okay.
I recognized, I heard early on that they were really trying to go back to the source novel, and just you just can't match Hitchcock. So don't try. You're making a movie in color. You're doing modern, a little bit more modern effects and decadence to do Hitchcock's level of gothic mise en scene and atmosphere. You just can't do it. So paint your own is how I felt about it. And so by painting your own, is it still a very effective story and film and something you can do nowadays? I wondered and worried if they were going to move this to like a modern setting instead of the matching period setting, but they left a period. Um, that I think the easiest high level thing I can say, and it's from my review, is that expression "hard act to follow" is
Hmm.
the number one thing because you have in character in the movie you have a hard act to follow of whatever the first wife was, and when you have the reputation, even if it's been 80 years since the first Rebecca, just even if you don't try to follow Hitchcock, you're gonna follow Hitchcock, and you're gonna be immediately compared to Hitchcock. So there's no way around it. So you kind of have to do your own thing and try to paint your own thing. And I think the movie did okay to do that. Uh, there's definitely more hot-blooded thrillers that are out there. There's definitely more hot-blooded romances that are out there. There's definitely movies that I think pull off the gothicness in a modern way, or at least with modern trappings, and you can free yourself from Hays codes and old school things of censorship, where you can kind of unchain something with this one, and it still kind of doesn't. So I was okay with it, kind of like a 3 out of 5 situation.
Okay.
You?
Uh, I I think we're pretty much on the same page,
Hmm.
except I'm going to be a lot harsher in my criticisms of it,
That's fair.
perhaps unfairly, because as you point out, you don't follow Hitchcock. We learned that with Gus Van Sant in Psycho.
Yep.
Um, and it's, that movie, Van Sant was trying to do a shot for shot remake. With something like Rebecca, I almost feel like Ben Wheatley would have been better off either doing a shot for shot remake, or if not that, then just sticking strictly with the script Hitchcock was working with. I have not read the novel, so I don't know if
Mhm.
some of this dream imagery and some of these weird differences that we
Yeah.
see are true to the book or not. But I just feel like there was so much more going on in the movie. The movie's 10-15 minutes longer, I think, than the remake.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but you can tell it takes its time, very long takes, lots
Hmm.
of great conversations and just these great
Oh
moments of
yeah,
silence. Whereas the film, it speeds up a lot. It's
it
just
does.
about as long, but you don't quite have that same feeling of absorption. It feels like a
Hmm.
modern thriller made for the Netflix audience, which may be insulting, but I kind of don't care because I feel like
No,
more people should just watch the original and
I
and
agree.
get wrapped up in it, because I'd never seen Rebecca until this afternoon.
It's been years, so I made sure to watch the first one before the new one. I needed to do it too, and glad I did. And you're right, everything lingers a lot longer because you said it best. Those old movies, they take their time. Like I think of that key middle scene in the movie where Laurence Olivier in the cabin kind of reveals all, to Mrs. De Winter, and that scene in the Olivier version takes its time, spells it all out, works every emotion because that's Olivier kind of really putting the speechifying stage man on that he is because he's a Shakespearean actor. And then in this one with Army Hammer, that scene is a fraction of that time, and it just doesn't, like you said, hit, absorb, or resonate the way it does. The part that I think that the new one does better is the initial romance. They spend a good amount of time making that relationship in Monte Carlo richer in the new one more than the old one, in my opinion. The old one, it feels more whirlwind, more gossip, more curtain quick. This one is, I'm not, they don't go steamy enough really, but it's a little hotter, a little more passionate, a little more colorful. And I think that helped the beginning of the movie. But then you hit that middle, and if you can't quite match the gothicness of Hitch, then you lose people. Because you're going to get to the end, and I knew the ending was going to be changed, because that's one of the famous things about the old one that Hitch couldn't do, is have comeuppance and have death happen who it needs to happen to. And this new one, I don't know if it is super duper effective compared to what Hitch had to do to twist it, but yeah, that second third and that last third, it's trickier. It's trickier for sure to pull off, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, and it's well, let's just rewind the tape a little bit
sure.
to say what this movie is.
Mhm.
There's a young lady named, and this drove me crazy in both
Is the
versions.
same in the book too.
Is okay, so her
Mhm.
name is just she's just referred to as Mrs. De Winter.
The second Mrs. De Winter.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I
often,
guess
but yeah, Mrs. De Winter. Other than that,
you can get away with that in a film. I'm curious about a novel because if you're talking
mm-hmm.
about a character who hasn't yet become Mrs. De Winter and
Mm-hmm.
you're describing her in the book, is it just she, her? It's like the pronoun game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is it always just like she went to the beach? Well, who is
Yeah,
she?
the girl
Yeah,
and
just
her,
call
the
her
Mrs.,
Becky or
the
something.
lady. Yeah.
Right, because and it's just I don't know if it's a hangover of like sexism or something, but it's like
Yeah.
hell, even Mr. De Winter gets a name and referred to often as Maxim,
Mm-hmm.
Max. He's got a bunch of names,
Yeah, from what I could tell, it was very intentional of the author to leave that enigmatic and loose.
which I can kind of understand because in this film there are two Mrs. De Winters and they're both kind of struggling for identity and they're different eras.
Mhm.
But it's just a bit strange, a little too
Yeah,
conspicuous sounding.
true.
But so let's the second Mrs. De Winter, she is the paid companion of a wealthy older woman. They're hanging out in this town that's not Monte Carlo; it's somewhere else in the original version.
Sure.
The remake, it is Monte Carlo, but they encounter Laurence Olivier's character, who is Mr. De Winter, who is recently widowed. He's kind of this miserable, older, grumpy guy, and the second Mrs. De Winter,
Hmm.
she encounters him as it looks like he's about to jump off of a cliff. She's walking through this
Yes.
kind of wooded area over these cliffs, and she sees this guy. It's a real George Bailey at the end of It's a
Hmm.
Wonderful Life moment. And she interrupts him, and he kind of snaps at her, says, go walking and stop screaming at me or whatever. They encounter each other again in this restaurant with this wealthy old lady who knew him at some point, in passing, and she's like, "Oh, we should hang out since we're both at the same, fabulous resort for the weekend." He
Hmm.
takes more of an interest in this young girl, and whirlwind romance later, she becomes the second Mrs. De Winter, the first one being named Rebecca.
Hmm.
They go back to their estate, which is called
Manderley.
Mandalay. I keep thinking of
Manderley.
Mandalay, like Mandalay Bay
I
in
know, I'm waiting
Vegas
for
or
a casino.
something.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But so Mandalay it very much is like Xanadu in Citizen
Hmm.
Kane, which is the first of two huge Citizen Kane comparisons here,
Hmm.
which I was just kind of floored seeing this movie. But there's this big estate with dozens of wait staff and servants and everything. And a kind of mysterious old lady named Mrs. Danvers, who's like the head of the
Mm.
household, like managing everything. And everyone is eyeing the second Mrs. De Winter with something like suspicion, with kind of this spookiness, and almost a reverence, because it turns out she is this wide eyed, almost like a country girl who's not used to this life of opulence by any stretch.
Hmm.
But she is nice and caring and compassionate, which we come to find out the first Mrs. De Winter was not. And
Hmm.
it kind of that sets up a mystery. Well, why would Mr. De Winter marry someone like that? And then the mystery unfolds. Now, we don't have to get too spoilery on this because if
Nah,
you
nah, nah.
haven't
Let people
seen,
say.
right, if you haven't seen the Hitchcock version, you should definitely seek it out, which is a tough thing to do because as we were
Ooh.
talking about, I had to rent it a DVD from my
Hmm.
local library.
Hmm. Me too.
You can find a full version, a nice digital copy on YouTube.
I agree.
However, I went out,
Yeah.
I did the legwork because I'm like, it's Hitchcock. I gotta support, gotta
Mhm.
support Hitch.
Right.
And I'm glad I did. So there's a big mystery.
Mhm.
Is the first Mrs. De Winter dead? What's
Yeah,
why
the
is she such a
circumstances of her death is a big thing. Yeah,
yeah, why is she such a presence in this house? It's almost set up like it could be a ghost story, and it kind of is, but it's more of a psychological thriller.
yeah. The
Now,
novel really tries to angle with, like you said, with its mystery and with the, on the written page, it plays like a ghost story, where, like you said, the visions I think come out more in the book than, like, Hitch didn't do too many visions. He had his initial voiceover, he had his atmosphere of setting, but not, like you said, images of a walking brunette, going through here, going through there, and that kind of, like, Wheatley went more literal with it, and it definitely has its moments where it's like Mother Light, Lite, like light beer light, like
oh,
it,
Mother,
you know,
like the
it,
Jennifer Lawrence movie?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It tries to go there where, I mean, obviously Mother is really effed up,
Hmm.
and it doesn't go that dark at all. I wonder if it could have or should have, because Ben Wheatley's made darker stuff than this, and I figured if he was going to go here, but he still kept it very prim, and I didn't know if that worked or didn't work.
I it's tough
Yeah,
because let's talk about what worked in that initial stretch because you compliment the remake
a
for
little.
that romance, and I'm kind of there with you. I like
Hmm.
that because in the Hitchcock version, I get it. He's a wealthy older man. She's this kind of young girl with stars in her eyes.
Hmm.
Sure, they fall in love and get married, in what seems like a weekend. Maybe a little
Oh,
bit
I
more
know.
time has passed, but
Yeah.
in the new version you can tell it's a span of days. They're going out, they're hanging out, they're very loose, and you can see a real affection growing between them.
Hmm.
As much as I like that from a it makes sense that they got married perspective, I also don't like it because first of all, there's a significant age difference that there's supposed to be between Olivier and
Hmm.
Joan Fontaine, who's the actress who played second Mrs. De Winter, and that's kind of important because there's a maturity, there's a real melancholy
Yeah.
in that character. You don't see him laughing and prancing around on the beach, except in the home movies of their honeymoon, which we see after the fact. He's a
Hmm.
very haunted man.
Yeah.
Whereas in the remake, Army Hammer, who I really like as an actor, I love him and Lily James,
Yeah,
but
she's
he's
wonderful.
not haunted. It's almost like
No.
he's the understudy for DiCaprio's Great Gatsby.
Yeah. He's
Uh,
dour because Hammer can do that, but he's still, unbuttoning women's clothes and, making love on the beach. Like, that's not
But
grieving,
he's also kind of like prankster. She's smiling like that whole
Yeah.
gag where she doesn't know that he's the important guy who's
Hmm.
getting into the restaurant kind of thing. He's kind of playing with that.
Yeah.
So he's not detached. And they also left out the scene at the cliff. Like they
Yes, they
first meet
did.
each other
That's a
at
big
that
clincher.
restaurant and
Yeah.
they don't establish his temper early on.
Hmm.
They kind of, I think, make one reference to it, but you never see it. Whereas you see
Yeah.
Laurence Olivier is unbalanced, and the way
Hmm.
he talks to her even when they're on their getting to know you kind of phase, he's like calling
Hmm.
her, I think he calls her a dumb woman, or he like kind of orders her around and,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So even though you kind of think, well, maybe it was the time and things were just kind of accepted and they didn't, women didn't
Sure.
think for that anything of that. I'm
True.
sitting here in 2020 being like, hey, Buster, no.
Right. Right.
So it's a more of a modern, I kind of like take on a classic romance, I
Yeah.
guess, but I missed that edge because that edge is really important later on.
Hmm.
And let's talk about that middle scene, the reveal where
Yes.
Mr. De Winter comes out and tells his second wife what happened to his first.
Hmm.
It's a long scene, and I think it's a throwback to the idea of like early cinema was based on either novels or plays where they didn't have a lot of special effects and crazy
Yeah.
cutting and editing and playing with the audience that way. So you had Olivier telling this horrific story, and I could see it. I could
Oh yeah,
see
because
what was
Olivia
going
can do
on.
that. Yeah.
Right. It's a combination of the writing and the acting. I swear to God, I was watching a flashback, but all I was doing is watching a guy walking around the room and telling a
Hmm.
story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in the original. And in
Oh
the
yeah.
remake, they just have these cutaways to dream sequences. We see the first Mrs. De Winter kind of in silhouette and like walking away from us, but I didn't need any of that in the
No,
original.
that, like you said, the original makes it good because it is the tell don't show thing that movies can do strongly if they do it right, where a good actor just using words and expressing it with enough emotion can your mind rolls with the hamster wheels and does the rest. And a lot of times what you imagine is sometimes worse than probably what actually happened, because your mind thinks the worst, yeah, especially if it's told the worst. And Olivier nails that part in the original, where that, like you said, and that's a legit stage actor doing a stagey performance, working the limited set and limited room. You don't need anything lavish in that moment, but what's lavish is the time he spends and the acuteness he puts in his performance. Army Hammer can't do that. Army Hammer, you're right. You need the cutaways. You need the you need the editing and the assistance, or the movie has to show it for you, because they don't trust you to kind of paint that dark picture. It's also a little different because of just the that's also a place where that kind of the old censors, like in the what I think in the Olivier version, he what am I? Can we spoil this? I don't know if we can, but in the Olivier version, it's an accident that
Yes,
he,
I was
that
going to
he
mention that.
shoots
Yes.
that he shoots the wife. In obviously in the new version, you can straight up say, "I shot my wife,"
Well, that's the
and
thing. Let's go back.
yeah.
I don't think there was any gun at all. I think what happened was,
In the
I think
Hitchcock one, it's
I
like an
think
accident.
yeah, but he didn't
Yeah,
shoot her. I think he struck her.
something like
Like
that.
there was some kind of an altercation, and I think
Hmm.
he lashed
Like a
out.
beam, or yeah,
Yeah, or
something.
something like that, and she fell, and then what happens happens.
Hmm.
In this new version, there's a gun involved, and they kind of try and pull the same thing off, but it doesn't
Hmm.
have that weight because
Yeah.
there's a tragic quality to the way that that incident happens in the original that is
Hmm.
compounded by something that we learned later and doubly compounded by something we learn after that.
Hmm.
So you've got a triple whammy, whereas in this new
Yeah.
one, you've got, well, it's kind of a double whammy because there's a gun
Yeah.
and there's a lot of stuff that's just not as artfully handled.
I thought the third act, when we get to the criminal investigation part of what transpires, I thought the new one did that part reasonable justice. Like you had, stronger, more argumentative, characters coming together and butting heads. In that way, you have, and what's important in both versions is, the girl stands by her man. In both, where Fontaine takes it to another level of, I'm just going to get closer to the man I love, support him through this grief and all. In the old movie, it means you whimper and you whine in front of a public trial. In the new one, it's Lily James starting to maybe weave a little more, spider webs and cobwebs to help this all go through, which I admired. Despite that being such a swerve from the sweetie pie Lily James we had all movie, because we've seen the original, I knew, like, all right, she's gonna twist herself a little bit, and it's gonna be interesting to see if she can roll there. And Lily did it all right. I mean, it's hard to watch Cinderella herself go dark, but she pulls it off.
And that's something else. Well, let's go to the Citizen King thing before I
Yeah.
forget it. This first part is not a spoiler. The second part is spoiler-ish,
Hmm.
but not doesn't really affect you because we won't tell exactly how it got to this point.
Yeah.
But both movies open on the kind of ghostly, almost bombed out estate of this mega
Hmm.
mansion of a billionaire. In Citizen Kane it was Xanadu, and this one it is
Mandalay. Yeah.
Manderley. I'll get that right
Hmm.
one day. And then at the end, you see a very important object that starts with the letter R on
Hmm.
fire, and it's in close up.
Hmm.
It's the exact same, and with
It
almost the
is.
same kind of
Yeah.
undertones about
This
not
would
really knowing someone.
Rebecca would predate Citizen Kane by a year, so we can say Rebecca did it first.
I was see, I didn't look this up before we
Kane, I
talked
think,
because
is
I
41 and Rebecca's 40, so props to Hitchcock.
yeah, and uh, I wonder if anyone's talked about this. Did Wells see Rebecca and be like, "Hey,
Ooh, I like
that's
that.
a
Let's
great
do that.
idea."
Yeah, show me how you shot that fire. Yeah, yeah, it was good.
um,
The other compliment I could say that it's an improvement from the new one versus the old one. I thought Kristen Scott Thomas was awesome.
I
Because
don't. I
I
look.
like, she has just that bi. I'll go first. She has that bi language of curtness where, and I don't want to say like only God forgives in some of those hard women roles that she's been playing the last decade compared to when she was a younger, hotter thing in something like The English Patient, or Four Weddings and a Funeral and stuff like that. But she can do that prim, proper, curt but not crazy, with enough wrinkles and grimaces and sideways talking squints. Like the body language of that, I thought, despite being small, was more animated than the original woman from 1940, who just played it cold, played it hard, played it straight. Not a lot of inflection. Where I thought the extra inflection from Kristen Scott took that role a little further. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's a darker, more harsher figure in the original. But I thought the performance-wise, Kristen Scott, I thought was awesome.
And I think
You
that's sort
tell
of
me
my,
what you thought.
I think that's kind of my problem with it is from this before I watched the original movie and didn't know who or what a Mrs. Danvers was. I think I'd
Mhm.
seen like stills of this new movie and I saw Kristen Scott Thomas. I knew exactly who and what she was.
Yeah.
It's all right there and there's not really anything more to it. I think there's more to the original portrayal of Mrs. Danvers because she's not so outwardly menacing. She strikes an imposing authoritative figure, but you
Hmm.
don't know exactly if she's a villain. She could just be an ally, someone that maybe the second Mrs. De Winter could actually get on her side. When you look
Hmm.
at Kristen Scott Thomas, there's none of that. You're like, no,
Yeah.
she's going to be the
Can't steer from your way.
antagonist, right? And I also, and this gets back to what you're saying about Lily James. I get that that her version of Mrs. De Winter has a bit more agency at the end than in the original, but that was another thing I thought was predictable because I'm going to sound terrible saying this, but it feels like a movie that was made in the last 5 years where you've got
Yeah, I
even
know
a
where you're going
period
here.
piece. You've got to have the strong, the woman become, come into her own and be strong. And the guy takes kind of a
Hmm.
back seat. He's falling apart. She's got to step in and fix
Yeah.
everything. You've got Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers defending the first Mrs. De
Hmm.
Winter by saying, um, I've got it written down here because it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
really yikes.
Mm.
Oh, it's because I've got pages and pages of notes, which I'm reading here on the screen. This
Hmm.
is great.
Hmm.
Oh, here it said,
You're good.
she lived her life as she pleased. No wonder a man had to kill her. And she emphasized
Mm.
man. It's like this whole thing as
Yeah.
if there was some kind of an oppression in the original Mrs. De Winter. Now, what we know of her from the original Rebecca, that was not the case. She was, or at least it's implied that it's not the case. It's not a matter of she had to struggle and fight her way to this position where she can manipulate people. You just kind of get the feeling it was almost like an Omen situation, where she was
Hmm.
born to be this presence that dominated everyone's life around her. And I
Yeah.
think by adding that really weird implication in the remake, it kind of ironically downplays the potency of her character. Does
Okay.
that make any sense?
It does. I'm following you there. Yeah. No, I think the other thing that helps or hurts is that that extra cog in the wheel in the third act, which in the original was Shere Khan, George Sanders, playing I think it's the car salesman cousin from in town who, knew the first Rebecca and was really trying to push that investigation of her death. In the new one, it's what's his act name? Jack. What's the new actor's name? Here, I'll fumble through my notes next.
Okay.
Do 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 do. What is that guy's name? I'm gonna scroll way too down and never find it because they put it in appearance order and not the
was
regular order.
was he the guy that was on that Boardwalk Empire show? Or is that
Probably.
someone else I'm
Sam
thinking of?
Riley.
Okay, I
Sam
don't think it
Riley
was him.
plays the Jack Favell in this one, and he is maybe a more of a, you know, yeah, I don't want to say, but like Caddy and he's more of a sly, sneakier, definitely more antagonistic presence than Shere Khan, George Sanders in my great looking suit and my low great voice because I played Mr. Freeze and Batman too. So yeah, he's George is just more tower and more more stature, and then Sam just looks the slimy part that he's going to play,
And again, that
which
goes
also kind of telegraphs too much. So
right because when we see Mr. Favell in the original, he's kind of sneaking around when he's
yeah.
introduced with Danvers. You're like, what's going on here? But then he pops into the window and kind of
Hmm.
surprises Mrs. De Winter, and he's a very dashing guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was the first Mrs. De Winter's favorite cousin."
Hmm.
And so when you find out what their relationship actually meant towards the end, it almost makes it like sleazier
Yeah.
because this Mrs. De Winter, I don't get the feeling that she would hang out with this Weasley little wormy
Hmm.
non-dashing guy. I
Yeah.
think she would go for the
Sanders
tall
is more
striking man.
convincing. I
Yeah,
agree.
because
Yeah.
he's more the type of Mr. De Winter. They kind of
Mhm.
they match up.
They do. That's true.
So yeah, there's just all these little comparisons that I wish Wheatley had almost just gone
Mhm,
and found similar actors and shot this, just shot the original
mhm.
script verbatim and forgotten about the book if this is in fact a real interpretation of it. I mean,
Yeah.
the screenwriters are kind of
We got a
odd.
weird little mix of people here. I wrote them down.
Jane Goldman, who wrote, among other things, Kick-Ass and The Kingsman.
Yeah,
And
it's the oh,
I
that's right.
love
It's the
Kick-Ass.
Kingsman trio. Right, right.
I love Kick-Ass. But I just, yeah, there, and Joe Shrapnel. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
a
Got I hope
nom de
that's a stage
plume
name.
or yeah.
Right.
It's like
If not, he's that's a great Magic Mike stripper name if he needs one. Joe Shrapnel.
from the writer of Kick-Ass and Joe Shrapnel comes
Yeah.
a retelling of the classic Hitchcock love mystery.
Yeah, and that's where I go back to Ben Wheatley. Like, I don't know if you've seen High Rise that he did with
I saw
Tom Hiddleston.
I saw most of High Rise. I think I turned it off because I had to
It's
go do something and I just never
yeah,
went back. And I did see Free Fire
I did see
that
Free Fire too.
and I saw that at the Music Box where he was actually doing a Q&A afterwards.
All right.
And I was so not a fan of Free Fire that I was the guy who, as they're bringing out the chairs, I got up and left with a bunch of other
Okay.
people. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need to hear what he has to say about anything.
No, Free Fire is a rough one. I really like the style and twisted mental mechanics he puts into something like High Rise, where I was expecting, I don't know, expecting is the wrong word because that's something E-Man does. I'm not an expectations guy, but the potential of what he could do, I knew it was possible. Like if there's a guy who can, short of Aronofsky doing something like Mother, who can maybe make a mentally challenging movie. Wheatley fits the bill, and I thought I'd see more, more High Rise like stuff. And it just, I can't name a moment of this movie where I was, you're not supposed to be scared, but where I was like really chilled up and like, ooh, where is this going to go? Or I wasn't wrapped up in mystery. Like it doesn't help that I saw the original before it, but like even new audiences, I can't name, especially new audiences that have been pumped on the Ari Asters and who's the guy who does Robert Eggers, who does The Witch and The Lighthouse. Like in today's audiences for psychological thrillers, this is weak sauce. It's if the decadent romance doesn't scoop people in and at least keep them around, the thrills aren't going to do anything to amp them up. So I don't know where that's going to go for the potential of this movie. Looks great. You got Joe Wright's regular production designer, four-time Oscar nominee, making everything look gorgeous, and that's fine and all. But like the chills and the storytelling that's supposed to kind of be the atmosphere and keep you in, I don't know if there's enough of it.
Yeah, I agree, and you're totally right. The production
Mhm,
design in both versions is
mhm.
wonderful, and I thought that if this movie had had more of the attitude of, say, Crimson Peak, which
There
is
you go.
another big kind of gothic haunted house movie that really does take its time. That's more in the vein of the original,
Hmm.
uh, film that we're talking about than this one. I think it really could have been something special. I'm glad you mentioned Ari Aster and Dave Eggers,
Yeah,
because what if they had, they've got real sensibilities. They're trying to do something that's more old school, patient
yeah,
horrors. I'm not a fan of Ari Aster's end products. Like I
yeah. I'm
didn't,
not a yeah,
you
but
know,
they would
b
fit something to attempt this.
right,
Yeah.
because I mean, what was that thing it came out with last year with the cult?
Um. I know. Midsummer.
Midsummer, yes.
Hmm.
That movie's like 3 hours long.
Oh yeah.
I could see that guy making a 2 hour long, very patient, very studied film that I could trust him to get everything right and still, if we just tap him the shoulders and say, hey, those jump scares, those freak
Mhm.
gore moments that you've got planned
That's
for
the
the third
screws,
act,
right?
just take them out. Everything
Yeah.
else is perfect. Just take them out, and
Yeah.
you've got a
Leave all the
perfect atmospheric
spook. Take out all
thriller.
the gore. Sure.
Because I for the first 40 minutes of watching the original Rebecca, I thought to myself, this is a Hitchcock movie.
This is a soft one for him, or this was his American debut at the time. It's the only one that he's ever had that won an Oscar for Best Picture. And you look at his filmography and go, that's the one that won. I don't think many people put this as top five Hitchcock, but
I definitely would now that I've seen it because it's so different.
not bad. Yeah.
It's got that almost like a 1940s romantic
Hmm.
comedy, almost even with that dit, 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 dit kind of a soundtrack to
Yeah,
it at
yeah,
some
yeah.
points, which is a great contrast to the darkness that seeps in
Hmm.
later in the picture,
Yeah.
to the point where things are like on fire and people are yelling and accusing. The one thing I do want to again disagree with lightly, because I think you're making some great points. I think it's just a
Sure.
matter of our perception. But you seem to like the combative nature of that sort of courtroom scene towards the end of the film,
Yeah.
right?
I like how Lily plays it, you know,
Okay.
with the, I don't want to say puppeteer, but the her participation, her willingness to stand by her man. I thought I like the conviction of it in this one more than the
Yeah.
40s-ness of the original, you know.
The thing I liked about the 40ness of the original, and this is going to go back to kind of issues of sex,
Hmm.
or gender issues, I guess, whatever you want, kind of like gender politics,
Hmm.
is I liked that wilting kind of scared performance, in that I think it underscored the problem of the societal kind of male influence of the time,
Hmm.
because a lot of that climactic scene took place in one or two locations on the same day. It was like they were gathering detectives and like a
Hmm.
doctor, and there's a lot of it took place in a parlor, and there were a lot of people who are rushing in to kind of defend Mr. De Winter, because he
Hmm.
was a philanthropist. He was so well known in town. He was like the
Right.
Bruce Wayne. It's like finding out that
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne might have done something horrible. A lot of the people's first judgment is be like, no, it couldn't be him, or there's got to be an explanation for. There's a lot
Hmm.
of protectionism going on,
Yeah.
but it's also getting kind of tense because you've also got this other force. Um, I've
Who
forgotten his.
loves Rebecca? Yeah. Jack
Yeah,
and that whole crew. Yeah.
yeah. So you've got this real tension going on, and if it weren't for that those kind of rose-colored glasses, I think
Hmm.
the truth would have been a lot more easily gotten to. But that complicates things for me as an audience, because I can see where Mr. De Winter is, where Maxim's coming from, but
Hmm.
I also don't like the idea of someone getting away with something so horrific just because they're beloved and well connected. We have enough of that
Right.
in the world.
And that was, I guess, Hitch's problem was he couldn't. He had to, like, he had to make come, like, what was the Hays Code thing? He had to, the bad doing party had to have come up, as they couldn't get away with it. So in the original, it's, it's burn the house down and send her with it. In this new one, it's a little jump off a cliff. The cliff jump we should have got at the beginning of the movie. So that's weaker sauce too, because then you're like, ooh, whose hair is that? Is it Mrs. Andrews's or is it Rebecca? So.
And we see the ship. For people who haven't watched either, they're not going to understand what we're talking about. But there's
No.
a shipwreck,
Hmm.
and there's stuff that they find in addition to a shipwreck. In the
Hmm.
original film, they're describing what's going on, and you're kind of left with that. Oh my God, what did they find? And this
Hmm.
one, you see exactly what they find.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Again,
showing off their
overtelling.
budget. Yeah.
Yeah, overshowing.
So I made a very key decision this afternoon, and I
Okay.
think I made the right one. I watched the original before watching the remake, because there was part of me that was thinking, I know I'm talking about the new Netflix version with Don. Do I have time to watch both? The first is 2 hours and 15 minutes. The second is 2:04.
Hmm.
Jesus, that's a long day.
Yes,
Maybe
it
I'll just
is.
watch the remake and skip the original. I'm glad I didn't, because
No,
if I'd
I
watched
think you
this.
need to see them both. Yeah.
Right, but in that order, in
Hmm.
watch the original, because I think if you watch this new version, it kind of becomes so generic and so forgettable that you're like, all right, I guess this is probably an improvement over that dumb 1940s movie. I guess they made it better and it was just never good.
Yeah.
You could walk away with that impression. I could see that easily.
Yeah.
Whereas if
Some
you
newbie
watch,
will too. You know it. You know.
yeah, especially in black and white. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I would love to see Rebecca again on a big screen, because I put this up there with something like a visual feast like Citizen Kane,
Hmm.
that needs to be experienced, in all of its grandeur.
Yeah. To see that score piping through, and the
Mm,
way. I mean, I know, the fire in black and white kind of looks so. I know color makes everything in its own way pop, but like just the way they can do fire in black and white, it just lights your screen up. And I, like I said, like the colors of the new one help a little bit. Like you can kind of paint over paint over some weakness with some decadence, and again, that house and stuff looks good. But you're right, the experience of a black and white one, and even in a communal place where, not that there's a lot of gasps to be had in the old one, but just like you said, to in a big theater in a dark room, the mist and the darkness of a black and white movie envelops you, and it wouldn't do that in a color one sitting on your couch on Netflix. So I hear you there.
yeah, even watching that scene on a laptop, where it's at the beginning where he's looking over that cliff, and you kind of
Mhm.
see all that water and a bit of, I think, fog at the bottom of it. You're like, terrifying. I feel like something might
Yeah,
jump out at him,
right.
you know?
And
Um,
the best the new one can do is, and to its credit, is instead of being, you can tell a Hitchcock movie is shot on a stage. You know, not a lot of location work. Whereas this one, you can tell it had great location work, where you have those really dramatic diagonal cliffs of wherever they are on the coast in England, and you can do more of a wide vista shot to soak some of that in and put your characters very small against it. Some of that helps, you know, make some scope that makes a Netflix movie feel bigger, but not the same as when, like you said, the black and the white and the fog, you know, lock you in the dark. So
and let me just ask you one more quick point, because I did
yeah,
not get this at all. Maybe it's from the novel, but the sleepwalking thing. Mr. De Winter has
yeah,
a sleepwalking problem. I'm
yeah.
convinced it's just meant to give us an excuse to walk around, follow a character through a spooky house at
Hmm.
night. But
I think
was there
so too.
something did and I will admit fully that during the second half of this movie, I had it on and I was kind of like looking up at the screen every once in a while, but I was drawing while I was watching and listening to it.
I know.
So
I don't blame you there.
I don't know if I zoned out and missed the like, oh, he started sleepwalking after what happened with the first wife
Hmm.
happened, or
Yeah.
if he's always had this. Did they explain it, or was just kind of a gimmick? Do you think?
If it's explained, it's a throwaway thing that Danvers, you know, serves quickly to Lily just to shut her up, you know, a little bit. Not a full history. I don't think there's much admission when you get to the Army Hammer reveal middle. You know, it's not part of his speech of how he got there and how he's feeling and all that. I think it is an excuse just to walk up to some mirrors in a house and freak you out for 2 seconds. Um, and that's where you have your mother moment of the floor, you know, turning into green and trying to eat her up, and it's a misplaced little piece that just doesn't fit, because either either you go full mother and you just twist it all, or but you just can't throw in one of those little moments and then hope the rest can be old school Hitchcock. You either go all the way, and like, I hate to say what Ari Aster or Robert Eggers would do, or Dave Eggers would do, but you either go all the way there and do a different Rebecca, or you leave it out and you just, like you said at the beginning, you leave it out and you just go core. You know, you do it the hard way, which is with tell don't show. So
Yeah, and I feel like if I had a recommendation regarding this movie, it would be seek out the original and then watch Darren Aronofsky's Mother, and
mm,
you've got because if you watch this, you've got the kind of it's the vanilla, bland middle ground between
yeah,
these two great extremes of filmmaking.
true.
I know Mother is a divisive film, but it was one of my favorites the year it came out, and I just think it's so different and also tells a similar kind of story to what we have here in a lot of ways, but
Hmm.
it's more effective because it's gutsy and it just goes for
Oh
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even in a filmmaking standpoint, I mean, the sound of that movie, the tight close-ups and the cinematography of that movie of Mother, you know, Rebecca can't touch that, you know, or at least the new one has done not even close. You know, pretty sets is what it can do. Score from Clint Mansell ain't bad, but not Aronofsky takes what is Hitchcockian and blows it up with real twist and nerve, which I haven't seen anybody with, you know, and I'm not a big Eggers and Astor guy, but that's, yeah, that's modern Hitchcock right there. Yeah, or
Yeah.
what a guy like Hitchcock would have done in today's, you know, free flowing world of decadence. Like if that old man was alive today in the seedy times of whatever you want to call it, blondes and Pornhub, that's the kind of movie. That's the kind of movie Hitchcock, who you know would be making it before he gets locked up next to Weinstein. So yeah, because you know he would not survive today's Me Too times at all.
No, no.
Not a chance.
Uh, art,
Hmm.
art and artist separate.
Me too, all
Yeah.
the time. I will watch every Kevin Spacey movie you put in front of me every time. Name the person. I always separate.
Not the ones he made on Epstein's Island.
No, no,
Sorry.
no, no, not those. But no, recommend wise, you can do worse for a little romantic date night, little chiller on the couch, you know, for Netflix. I mean, it landed where it belonged. I don't think this would have had much life on the big screen if we had big screens. Um, yeah, or they'd have to really oversell it. And even the trailer they have for it shows you too much anyway. So
I
not
didn't
enough to make you go, ooh, that's $9, please, let's go. You know, so
well, I didn't watch the trailer. I knew literally
I watched it
nothing
after.
about this. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll have to go back and watch it now and just see what they did with it. But yeah,
like
you
most Netflix movies, they honestly show you too much of the movie. So, and Netflix has been really notorious for doing that. So
And that sucks because I can understand
Yeah,
like a multiplex thing where they're having to show you they really have to like lure you into the theater. But I mean, Netflix, it's just at home. You show a couple of cool shots, maybe a
that's all
brief
you got to do.
synopsis, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna press play or I'm not.
Especially with the name value. I mean, if you're trying to play, the Hitchcock vibe, and you drop that name, and you even drop the Rebecca name, like you've gotten a built-in ooh factor. And then Army Hammer looks good. Lily James is gorgeous. You don't have to do much. Show a little ambiance, show a little passion, and let the rest be the mystery. Because there's enough mystery to be had if you don't oversell it. So, ah,
I'm gonna go back and correct what I said. Watch the
okay.
original Rebecca,
Mhm.
watch Mother, but the middle film is actually Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella, starring Lily
Oh,
James. We kind of alluded
yeah,
to
I
that because,
love his Cinderella. Yeah.
yeah, especially with Kate Blanchett as the evil,
Mhm.
stepmother. There's as much as I like Lily James, it's almost a mistake to cast her in this film because there's so much Cinderella in it, with
Oh
especially
yeah.
with the Danvers relationship, that I keep drawing these parallels, and it's almost like a
Yeah.
little titter, like, well,
Right.
she's gonna
Yeah.
ask you to sweep out the chimney next.
Right. 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 Is there the mouse going to come in and save you? Come on. What's going on next? Yeah. It is, because this is. You're right. It's a Cinderella story. It's the homely little assistant who gets ascended to nobility, so, through marriage. So, oh
Yeah, with
yeah,
the
it
Prince
feels.
Charming and the
Yeah.
staff who's kind of working against her in some capacity. Yeah,
And
jeez.
I get it. I mean, gosh, it's Army Hammer. He's a gorgeous man. I mean, he fits the part from the looks, but like we've been saying, he can't hold a candle to a stage presence moment when you need to be Olivier. So, oof, yeah,
Yeah.
no chance.
Well, you actually recommended this
Mildly,
conversation,
yeah.
and I'm
Oh,
glad
for
that
the
you
conversation, yeah,
yeah, that you reached out to say, "Hey, what about this Rebecca?" It almost flew right past my radar. So now I've discovered not only a new Netflix movie, which I can't really recommend, but I also finally watched a Hitchcock that I can cross off my list that I
right.
love. It's on there with my top 5 Hitches. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
If you are you a Notorious guy?
Haven't seen Notorious.
Ooh, that's
I've
next
got
level.
more to fit into my Hitchcock filmography. I should say it's my
Okay.
top 5 Hitchcock, but I haven't seen a lot of Hitchcock, so
Yeah, see, I got a pretty solid top five Hitchcock, and Rebecca doesn't make it, but it's no shame to Rebecca. Like I haven't, it's one of those things where I haven't seen a bad Hitchcock film yet. It's just a matter of which ones are whoa, and then which ones are So
what's weird and kind of frustrating
because I'm
is
I'm a Rear Window guy. That's
I
number one.
well,
Number
no
one.
judgments.
Mhm.
Oh, no, sorry. But I love Rear Window too. But I watched Rope for the first time a few years ago, and I was like, I have to buy this Blu-ray. So I went and bought the Blu-ray, and I found
Mhm.
out there was like a sale that for like $10 more than the cost of the standalone, I could buy the Alfred Hitchcock collection on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
So when I was looking up the original Rebecca, I'm like, well, I could just pull it off my shelf. It's not
Mhm.
in there. How is
Yeah.
the Academy Award winning Rebecca not in the Hitchcock Blu-ray
Right.
collection?
There's a new set going around, like I don't have a 4K device or player or anything, but it's the new physical medium of choice now. There's a 4K box set of Hitchcock going around right now, where there's supposedly like a director's unedited cut of Psycho on there, which is the first time ever on disc, but it's only Psycho, Vertigo, The Birds, and I think Rear Window. Those are the only four you get in the set. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a great four to have,
Yeah.
but you don't get Rope and in Notorious. And a lot of those things have made Criterion, where there's some nice discs to be had of those, Rebecca included. So I
I
mean, if you're a super duper Rebecca fan, I think the Criterion flash sale is still on for another 12 hours if you need it. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got to go look that up because, like I said,
yeah.
I just finished watching these. Now I got to go hunt down a copy. So,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, if
return
you
mine
like
to
it
the
that much,
library.
go. That's the way to go. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Sir
Mhm.
Don. I'll well, I'm going to read your review and then I'm also link it in this video slash podcast, however this
Yeah.
goes up. So, really appreciate the recommendation. I appreciate talking to you about it. I'm glad we're on the same page because I was
Yeah.
kind of dreading what this might end up like.
Me too for a little bit here. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks again, sir. And yeah, we'll talk more
We'll find
movies
another one.
soon.
It's award season. Stuff's coming our way. So, but no, I Rebecca, worth a couch movie. You could do worse on a Friday night.
Yeah. Uh, yes, but you could also do better by watching the original if you can find it,
I agree.
and
Find your
Mother and
libraries.
Cinderella. Yeah. If you got Disney Plus, watch the live action Cinderella. I
Hmm.
want to make a hearty endorsement. If you skipped it when it was in theaters, you're like, it's another live action remake. It's
This one's
special.
different. It's
Yeah.
very good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
It's
man.
my
Well,
number two Disney reimagining.
what's your number one?
Pete's Dragon is wonderful.
Okay, yeah.
And I think David Foley and I are high Pete's Dragon guys. So,
I think you're high for loving that movie, but that's another conversation. No.
that's yeah. Sorry about that.
No, all right, man. Cool. Well,
Until next
thanks
time.
again. Yes, take care and have a great night.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.